In today's video, we're covering the biggest news in January, starting with Sony being fined by the French government, Xbox officially coming to PS5, and PS5's biggest hack yet that actually doubles performance. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne and this is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. For today's video, I wanted to try something new where I go back into the month of January. I take my 3 videos every week and I pick the biggest stories from the month, so in case you missed a video, you can catch up on the biggest PlayStation news from the month before. I think it's a cool idea, so we're just going to jump right into it with the first thing you should know about, which is that Sony was slapped with a pretty hefty fine from the French government for blocking third-party controllers on the PlayStation 5. They got fined 13.5 million euros for making it so that basically like the only way you could get a license to make a PS4 or PS5 controller as a third-party developer is if Sony liked you, right? Like they made the rules super nebulous. They basically said, if we decide you can make one, you can make one, but they didn't give some of the smaller manufacturers any criteria to make it okay for them to make these controllers as well. On the PS4, I would definitely imagine that this was a bigger issue because the parts on the PS4 controller were not nearly as complex as the parts in the PS5 controller, but I could still see this kind of being an issue on the DualSense as well, because Sony very clearly doesn't want to share the technology that they have for this controller, like the haptic feedback and the adaptive triggers, because when you see controllers like the Nacon Revolution Pro, not only do they not have either of those features, it doesn't have vibration at all in PS5 games. So if you use haptic feedback in a game, it's just not going to vibrate that controller at all. Scuf has kind of like figured this out in their own weird way, where it looks like they take the actual internals of a DualSense controller and then build a new casing for it that still retains all of the different trigger features and haptic feedback and everything like that, which is cool. But this generation alone, there have been virtually like less than 10 third-party controllers total for the PlayStation 5, and it definitely comes down to the fact that Sony baked all of these next-gen features into the controller. And if you want proof of that, just look at how many third-party controllers are coming out all the time on Xbox. I think Ray does a video on a new one like every other month because they just show up. There's tons of different brands making tons of different controllers, and on the Nintendo Switch there's controllers coming out every other day that are like, oh, you can put GameCube style Joy-Cons on the Switch. Oh, you have a dock where you can drop the Switch onto a dock and it becomes a Steam Deck. Oh, you can actually just get regular Joy-Cons that don't have vibration and the battery lasts longer. Like there are so many options there. And then when you look at the PS5, yes, you do have the Access controller, you have the DualSense, you have racing wheels, but when it comes to actual just third-party controllers, the only ones that exist don't have vibration or are rebuilt actual DualSenses. They're not like a brand new controller themselves. So yeah, I do think whoever sued Sony had a pretty decent case here, right? Like I don't know how the French government even figured this out, like if someone reported it or what, but I guess Sony should be glad that the French government found out about it and not like the US government or anything like that, because while 13.5 million euros is like life-changing money for most people in the world, it's not life-changing money for Sony, right? If you convert it to dollars, it's $14.7 million. So like, yeah, that's like, it's a slap on the wrist, really. Like what are they losing? That's like the budget of, I don't know, Stray or something like that. So yeah, they had to put out an indie game for free, basically, to pay the French government. But yeah, that was actually the second time in like the span of the year that we had talked about Sony getting in trouble with governments, because we had this French situation, but in the UK, they're also being sued in a big class action lawsuit by people who are saying that, okay, so when you buy a game on the PlayStation Store, if Sony makes the game, they get 100% of the profit. But if they don't make the game, so something like, I don't know, let's think like Alan Wake 2. So they don't make Alan Wake 2. Epic Games makes Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake goes up on the PlayStation Store for $60. So when they sell a copy of that game, PlayStation gets to keep 30% of the profit. So basically what the class action lawsuit is arguing is that that 30% fee is making it so that developers basically have to charge 30% more for games than they would normally if that fee wasn't in place. And it's a really big bullshit lawsuit. When you read into it, it's apparently only being done in the UK and not the US because they're more lenient with lawsuits like this where class action stuff can actually go through. I mean, we've seen this with the iPhone very recently. The UK and the EU are way more open to class action lawsuits like this, but I just don't really see it. I mean, if you're coming coming after Sony for it, that's fine, but you'd also have to go after Steam, you'd also have to go after Microsoft, even Epic Games. They take a much lower fee from developers, but at the end of the day, every storefront takes a fee for giving you the ability to sell your game on the store. Like, they are providing a service. They're providing a place where people know they can go to buy PlayStation 5 games, and they do a good job advertising them on the home screen of the console and on the front page of the store, right? Like, they're not just taking the money, they're providing a service to developers and charging for it. So I think that class action lawsuit is just ridiculous, honestly, and I hate defending a big company like that, but it's crazy the stuff people come up with these days. So yeah, it's weird to see Sony in the courts so much lately. Of course, they also had to be part of the Activision Blizzard situation with Microsoft a bunch, and that hurt Jim Ryan a lot, to the point where it seems like he was pushed out just a little bit from Sony for not blocking that deal, and he said some weird stuff behind the scenes about it. So yeah, I think this is just going to keep happening more and more, which is unfortunate, because the more Sony spends time in the court system, spending money there on lawyers and everything like that, the less time, energy, and money they're going to have to manage making good games over for the PlayStation 5. Next up here, let's talk about this situation with Xbox coming to PlayStation 5. I mean, this has been a rumor for a very long time, because there were leaks last year that said Master Chief Collection might have shown up on the PlayStation 4 or 5. Of course, Xbox is always talking about how they want to get Game Pass on as many platforms as possible, and even Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, recently was saying in interviews that he wants games from Xbox on as many platforms as possible, including PlayStation. That's paraphrasing, that's not specifically what he said, but he was heavily implying it. So then right around the time that the developer direct was announced, we started getting rumors about 3 specific games. The first one was Hi-Fi Rush, the second one was Sea of Thieves, and the third one was Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Will of the Wisps is already on Nintendo Switch. Xbox ported it there right around the time that the game came out, but they would be porting it over to PlayStation 5, which would be new, and that'd be cool because it's one of the only games that you can run at 8K on the new consoles, which is sweet. But there's already precedent there, so it really wouldn't be a big deal. Hi-Fi Rush, I also thought would be a good idea, because that game came out on Game Pass, it was shadow dropped right away, and it's probably sold through what it's going to sell through, right? Like, people who wanted to play on their Steam Decks had to buy it on Steam to play it there, because while yes, you can stream over Xbox Cloud Gaming, that experience sucks. Even on PC it sucks, so playing it on your Steam Deck, it's even worse. So they probably bought it there, and then now it's going on sale all the time, or you can pick it up even cheaper on G2A. On Xbox, because it was released on Game Pass day one, there's no way anyone bought the game. Like, I'd be really curious to see how many thousands of copies that game sold on Xbox. Like, there's no way that game broke millions when it comes to actual sales, because you'd be dumb. You could just pay $1, get the month of Xbox Game Pass, and play this 12-hour game over the course of a weekend, and you got the game entirely for $1. So putting that over on the PlayStation platform, that makes a lot of sense. You've already got the word of mouth built in, you've got great reviews. It's like a critically acclaimed game from Xbox coming to PlayStation, and then people would probably show up and buy it for $40 full price, because that's definitely how they do it. And then the third one made a lot of sense to me as well, which is of course Sea of Thieves. That one is just like perfect to be released on PlayStation, because it's a live service game. It needs a big community of players, and if you have already crossplay between Xbox and PC set up, if you can add in an entire new console player base to that pool of players that you're going to have in the game, that's only going to benefit the community from top to bottom, and they're going to sell it. I would guess that the game might transition to free to play at that point, and then they would rely on battle passes or like cosmetics and all the other microtransactions that are already baked into the game. But even if they charge a premium for it, like 20 or 30 bucks, I think a lot of people on PlayStation 5 would be happy to jump into that game, because it has a big community already and people love playing it. We all thought we were going to get this announced at the developer direct, but it didn't happen. I think this is something that's just going to pop up out of nowhere, because it's not really a cool move for Xbox to have a direct stream that's highlighting all of their best developers, and then they start talking about PlayStation in the middle. I don't think that would go over very well. So I think it'll be kind of like how Sony announces the PC ports over on the PlayStation 5, where they just like throw up a trailer with the PC features set in the trailer. They say it's coming out on this date, please be excited for it, like they did with Horizon Forbidden West at CES. But yeah, as far as the developer direct goes, I think it was like mostly okay. Avowed didn't look that great to me in the direct, but then my buddy Jeff Rubenstein over at Xbox, he did a podcast where he played more of the game, and it looks 1,000 times cooler than it did in that direct. So if you have an Xbox and you were looking forward to this game, but the direct kind of disappointed you, maybe go check out that extra gameplay. Trials of Mana, could not care less about, honestly. My eyes glazed over. I was editing a video when that stream was happening, and I was like, oh, now it's time to edit. And then Indiana Jones looks awesome. I mean, it's not holding a candle graphically to Uncharted 4, but I do love that it's first person. I know that's controversial because Machine Games is an FPS studio. They made two incredible FPSs with Wolfenstein The New Order and Wolfenstein The New Colossus, so seeing them come back and do a first-person shooter with Indiana Jones is sick. So yeah, I think Xbox is in a good spot. Finally, I think PlayStation is also in a good spot despite their lacking release calendar in 2023, and I think going forward, we are going to see some Xbox games coming over to PlayStation. It's just a matter of time. And the third and final huge news story from the month is this PS5 hack which doubles the performance of the PlayStation 5. So this video is coming from Digital Foundry, where they tested a few games that run in PS4 mode on the PS5 and never got patches to unlock their frame rate. And I thought it was pretty cool because not only is it sweet to see games like Drive Club running at 60 FPS or Arkham Knight running at 60 on the PS5, the explanation as to why more games don't just get these patches actually makes a lot of sense. So basically the way they laid it out is that these games were made on an older software development kit for the PlayStation 4, and they have to be updated to use the PS4 Pro mode on the PS5. So if those games were never updated and developers are on a newer version of the software, it's apparently really difficult to get that older version of the software. So if the developers can't do it, then Sony would have to front a bunch of money to take the games in-house, re-put them on that software, and then export a version that allows you to run at 60 FPS or with an uncapped frame rate. And if your TV is running at 60 Hertz, you're going to get 60 FPS out of an unlocked frame rate from a game, which is sweet. And then later on in the article about this video, they were talking about how there's actually 3 different modes that the PS4 Pro can run in. So there's 3 different modes that the PS5 can emulate the PS4 Pro in. The first offers up base PS4 performance with the CPU boost, so that would come in handy in games that have stuttering, because CPU generally causes stuttering in games unless you're talking Unreal Engine 4, which compiles shaders on the go, and that's more handled by the GPU. Traversal stutter and stuff like that is handled by the CPU. So if you could run a PS4 with a higher clock speed on the CPU, that would eliminate stuttering and make traversal smoother, and probably make the 30 FPS a lot smoother overall. The second profile is the PS4 Pro setup that runs with the CPU and GPU overclocked, so you can play games at 60 FPS, and that works in certain games and not in others. I'll talk about that in a sec. And then the third configures the PS5 as a PS4. It's like a Hail Mary option that then reduces the clock speed of the PlayStation 5, and that I would guess is for games that just don't work right if they run better than they were meant to. Like there are just too many locks in place in the game, or settings were pre-configured to run at around 30 FPS, so it's not even worth trying to run them at a higher frame rate. So interestingly though, when Digital Foundry put Assassin's Creed Unity through this software that allows it to run unlocked on PlayStation 5, they tried all 3 of the different presets and it never really found one that it liked. In the third one, it actually was able to run uncapped, but because it was a lower spec PS4 mode, it was not reaching 60 FPS, which kind of sucks because over on the Xbox Series X and S, if you put your Unity disc in the console or download it from the Xbox store, that game got FPS boost, so it runs at a locked 60 frames per second. It's more Ubisoft's fault than Sony's because they didn't want to do the work. But yeah, I still think every single PS4 game that ever came out from Sony specifically, like a first party game, should have this patch. And the fact that we're still waiting on games that there's very clear demand for, like Bloodborne, is crazy. There is no reason why Sony should not have gone back and updated Bloodborne to run at 60 FPS on console. We've heard rumors for years about Bloodborne coming to PS5. I don't think it's ever going to happen, and for some reason Sony is just insistent on ignoring this game. Anyway guys, that's all I've got for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below, and remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.